kid from the bush who grew into a legend in his own lunchtime, former SAS soldier Michael J. Malone has seen it all. This is Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, hosted by the man himself, Mick Malone, along with Toby Malone, as they examine this long, storied career in the Australian Special Forces. Join us each week for behind-the-scenes insight, exclusive readings, and brutally honest truths from a true original. Welcome to Never Die Wondering. Welcome to episode 8 of Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, a podcast that explores the life and legend of Michael John Malone, OAM. My name is Toby Malone, Mick's son and co-host of this podcast series, joined by the man whose name is in the title, Mick Malone. G'day, Dad.
Hey, Toad. How are you, mate?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good.
Good. You've been having a good week? Keeping out of trouble?
Full on week.
Good.
Kept out of strife.
That's good to hear.
I think we may have found our future home.
Oh, good. Yeah, lots of different things going on. So last week we were talking about your life leading up to finding a future home. So last week we were talking about your time at Ingleburn and interviewing for the SAS and sort of getting set up and having a future ahead of you that you really didn't know what was happening. I think you kind of probably always assumed you were going to be in New South Wales for the whole run of your life, and then suddenly you've got this opportunity over west. So finding that new place to be, that's got to be daunting for a 19, 20-year-old to.
This voice boomed from the sky. I said, "Go west, young man."
Thank goodness you did. Yeah, because you also had mates who went to the interview for the SAS who then said, "No, I don't want to go out to Perth. It was too hard." Or maybe
I think they might have regretted it.
Maybe, yeah, that's right. So last episode we talked a lot about a lot of the training you were doing and getting started, and this week we find out that you were successful in being invited to the SAS Cadre. So we'll get into it in future episodes. We talk about the actual ins and outs of your cadre, but tell us a little bit about the history of this selection course. So how did they first start bringing blokes on to the SAS?
Well, the SAS started in 1964 as a company, and they modelled themselves on the Brits in World War II, the British SAS in World War II, and the Australian independent companies in the islands. Small teams of hard men who could do the job, and that was how they saw it. And the cadre was basically an encapsulation of all those things, and they basically put you through the hoops and ran the pencil over your ability to handle hardship and so on.
And just to clarify a date, you mentioned 1964. That was the year they became a regiment. 1957 was when they became they were a company. So they were a company 57 to 64.
57.
Yeah, and then 1964 was the when they became a regiment.
Was a regiment. Yeah, you're right. Of course it is.
Yeah, so we don't want the historians throwing rocks at us. Yes, those watching the video will see that Dad's wearing a hoodie that says 964, which is the SAS's fashion line now. 964 being September 1964. So who was the mad bastard who came up with the idea of these hardships of running these young fellas through these tests? Was it attributed to any one man?
Not from our point of view, but the Brits certainly had their own hard men who decided they wanted further hard men amongst the young blokes. And we had a lot of contact with the Brits, and we used to follow their. When I say we, I mean the Australian Army. Used to follow their example, and say, well, we can do that too. You know, we keep the team small. We train the hell out of them, give them good weapons, good intelligence, good means of infill and exfil, and we can do anything.
Mm.
So that was basically the roundabout, but and it worked out pretty well.
Good. Yeah, yeah. And so then the legend is always standing around the RSL on Anzac Day is everyone says my Carter was the hardest Carter.
It's always a big joke. My Carter was harder than your Carter. Well, I never ever said that because mine was a bit of a doddle
Right,
compared to others.
right. Yeah, I
And
think
I
that
came along at the time when they needed more men for Vietnam and had 24 to 27 on the selection course on the Carter, and they wanted them all.
right.
And we got most. Two or three dropped out because of medical reasons,
Or
and one
attitude
bloke,
reasons.
eh?
Attitude reasons.
And one bloke got thrown out because of his attitude. But that was it. The rest of us all graduated,
And then
and
and Stanley Bilbrough had bad feet. Wasn't that what happened?
Stanley Wilbur, a dreadful little man he was. He was the funniest bloke that ever drew breath, and he was an artist. And I've got some of his pictures on the walls here at the moment.
Hmm.
The best one is that the one upstairs, the lateral thinker.
Oh,
It's basically got Rodin's statue laying on its side.
right.
Lateral thinker,
Yeah.
Stanley. He was a demon. He's still alive, actually.
Yeah. Against all
75
odds.
years old, and he's still alive and having drunk every known alcoholic beverage that ever drew breath and shoved all the chemicals up his system.
So and
He
he
should have,
and he so he was on your Carter, but then he was held back because of medical
yeah,
reasons. Yeah.
he was wearing jungle boots, which are these green things they issued in World War II. He's wearing a pair of these he got from the bloody local, what do you call those places?
The disposal shop, the army disposal.
Yeah, disposal. He got a pair from there and he wore them on his Carter, and your feet can't breathe in them. And he ended up with rotten feet. And they kept him back for another Carter.
He didn't do it twice. He passed it twice.
Oh, mate. But then he joined us later to go to New Guinea.
Excellent. So
He was hilarious. I'll tell you what. We
yeah,
wouldn't have been the team we were without him.
yeah, and we'll get to talking about him and the ins and outs of the actual Carter in future episodes. But today, we're talking about the moment at which he was selected for the Carter. And so yeah, just I always like to put myself in the shoes of a young 19, 20-year-old bloke who's been given this opportunity, and you really
Yeah.
took that opportunity and went for it, which was
Hmm.
a new thing for you, considering how you'd been prior, fairly aimlessly.
Well, I was pretty fit and basically wouldn't have a go at anything.
Yeah,
And the blokes around me were very encouraging. And I thought, I can do this. We all said we can do this. And away we went.
good. Okay, so let's have a read of chapter 5. So today we will be reading chapter 5 of Two Ranks on the Road, 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone, OAM, published in 2024 by Imprimatur Books, Perth. This chapter, entitled Selected for SAS Cadre, covers pages 33 to 40 in the print edition. The ebook may have slightly different numbering, so follow from the beginning of that chapter. As we read, the body of the text will be read by author Mick Malone. Whenever we come across a footnote, we'll pause in the least disruptive way possible, and I will read the footnotes. And now, without further ado, Two Ranks on the Road.
You'll only last a week. There were about 17 of us from 3 platoons selected to head west for the SAS Cadre or selection course in July. The rest of them would be reinforcements to 7 RAR and head to Vietnam after completing quite a grueling training regime. which included a stint in the Jungle Training Centre at Canungra, Queensland. In the meantime, we still had plenty of training to undertake, which included range practices, various bush exercises in the larger training area, duties in the mess and guardhouse, and of course, the ubiquitous marching around, which never made much sense to me. On the range, we got to fire all infantry weapons from Bren guns, M60 MGs, Owen guns, the F1 submachine gun, in brackets, a pretty useless little weapon, but pistols, 9mm and 38, and our SLRs. There were the odd M16 there, but I never got to fire one. Bit of a toy weapon compared to the SLR. We threw countless M26 grenades, smoke grenades, and the odd white phosphorus grenade, which I found to be the scariest of them all. You needed a strong arm to guarantee it went the distance. In addition, we all performed butt details behind the stop butts, holding up targets and patching out the hits. This was a doddle of a detail, nothing to it, although the crack and thump of rounds going over the butt was most instructive because it was the first time many of us had experienced this. Weekend leave came quite often these days, and I was able to drive over to St Mary's to see my parents. In April, my beloved sister, Helen, married the love of her life, my best mate, Mick Ryan, in St Nicholas's Church in St Mary's. What a fabulous couple they made. Frank Ryan and Ned Malone got on the wallop. I still remember those two clowns. On the wallop and were the lives of the party. Mick and Helen were very happy.
Footnote: it was a very close family, visited by various tragedies. Mick lost his older brother John and then a younger brother Peter. Frank Ryan died quite young, and Mrs. Ryan lived quite a solitary life, finally passing away at an old age. Frank was a World War II veteran. The best family story was where Frank was a sergeant in some unit and his father joined up to be with him. So Frank was the platoon sergeant and his old man was a baggy ass in the ranks. The mind boggles. Helen's biggest tragedy was the loss of her beloved son Peter. His death at the age 37 deeply affected us all. He was a lovely young man with a huge talent for computers and electronics, and we all loved him deeply, especially my kids, Toby and Georgia.
Yeah, poor old Pete. Back in the barracks, all talk was of the future. We were a pretty close bunch of blokes, and separating was going to be quite a wrench. With ANZAC Day coming up, a few blokes in our platoon were selected to march in a march guard in Liverpool. The rest of us were consigned to duties. Of course, we got on the wallop after work.
Footnote: in memory of the fallen, you understand.
The next day, with all hands to the pumps, cleaning the entire area. Our ablution block dated back to the 1930s and had all sorts of wildlife in the ceiling. Our favourite being a brush-tailed possum who used to come down and eat any soap he could find. We scrubbed the place to within an inch of its life when, in fact, it should have been demolished decades before. Oh, sorry. Like everything else, it was what it was and was subject to the same white glove treatment as the barrack block. Compared to the pristine nature of the ablution block at Kapuka, this one was a medieval standard. Nevertheless, we strived to make sure it was as good as possibly could be to keep the sergeant off our backs. Before we knew it, it was time to pack our bongos for the next leg of the adventure. 12 of us were selected for the Vic Barracks Guard in Sydney, which was 2 weeks stint manning the front gate at Victoria Barracks in Paddington. Dress was in polyesters, sleeves down with ties. But as we were heading into winter, greatcoats were permissible on night shift. The commander of the guard was some irascible old woe-to who treated us only slightly better than what we'd been used to. He was only there during the day, but was known to sneak around the ground spying on the guard at night, all hours of the night. I think he might have had hankering to catch someone with his pants down and giving one of the streetwalkers a seeing to. There was plenty of them patrolling their patch. I must admit I enjoyed the variation in routine barracks. We slept well, ate well, and got a feel for life outside the institutions in which we had previously been. Pubs abounded throughout Darlinghurst and Paddington, and we made sure we were in twos or better, given the miscreants and lowlifes that seemed to proliferate in those parts. One of the blokes suggested we go to a tattoo parlour and get inked up. So off we trooped to a seedy place in Darlinghurst Road to see what we liked. Some of the blokes went for full murals on their backs, which took 3 sittings. Other military themes on legs and arms, 2 sittings, while one bloke had an entire fox hunting scene down his back with dogs, horses, riders in red coats and foxtail disappearing between the cheeks of his arse. What a sight. It cost him a bomb, I can tell you, and it took about 5 sittings. Me, I got my blood group ARH positive on my right arm, and because it hurt so much, I left it at that. As I look at it now, it's barely legible. I never got another one. After the Vic Barracks Guard, we packed up and the truck delivered us back to ECPD at Watson's Bay, where we were given leave. Those of us who were heading west to do the SAS Cadre were to be at Central Station in 10 days, while the others were to meet their 7-hour recruits at the same time. My car was at home at Dad's, so I had to get the bus to Central and catch a train home to St Mary's. It was quite a relief to see them and settled into my room, knowing I wouldn't be dragged out of bed at 4 a.m. This was my chance to catch up with a few of my old civvy mates, so I went searching for them, but they all appeared to have moved on. And then I saw the beautiful Chrissy Carmichael, which set my heart aflutter. I was still unsullied at this stage, although I was now 20. I was also desperate to see my little red-haired girl in Penrith, Adrian. So I drove up there to be given the rounds of the kitchen by a big brother, Brian, who just returned from a tour of Vietnam with an artillery unit.
Footnote: Brian was tragically killed 10 years later in the Granville rail disaster, 1977. R.I.P. Brian.
I still can't work out why I couldn't go the distance with a girl. Basically, I was too shy, a condition that certainly left me in the following years. As a 20-year-old, though, there was something wrong with me. I thought there was something wrong with me. I certainly had rugged features with bad acne scars, and I had a good physique, from playing both codes of rugby, running, and squash. I used to pull the chicks, but never really went all the way with them. Catholic guilt, possibly. Too much other stuff on which to concentrate. Before I knew it, I was off to Central Railway to join the draft to Perth. There seemed to be soldiers and slouch hats everywhere at Central, waiting for trains north and south. It was great to catch up with a Western draft of future SAS scoundrels. The trip to Melbourne was uneventful, and when we arrived at Spencer Street Station, now Southern Cross, we had 3 hours between trains, so it was off to the pub. I had turned 20 in April and we were still under 21, but who cared? It was the uniform which got us into pubs. We sank quite a few beers, a few large beers, distinctly different to the Rhesus, Tuies and Tooths we were used to in New South Wales. Carlton and VB seem to be the favourites down in these parts, as pointed out by a few of our blokes from Melbourne. We staggered back to the station to board our train for Adelaide. What an adventure this was, especially for a boy from the bush who had not been out of New South Wales. We're on the overnight train to Adelaide, where we would again change trains, this time to a narrow gauge line. This was left over from the pre-Federation days, which each state had its own rules. By this stage, I was missing my old mate, Jack Doulis. Jack didn't make the SAS cut, so he went to 7RAR along with Swimmer Bates and Timmy Cluckliffe.
Footnote: Tim was killed in action in Vietnam with 7RAR. RIP Tim.
Yeah, RIP Tim. Jack was always good for a laugh in his card games. I hope he will enjoy 7RAR and come back in one piece to his large family. We all got our heads down. Before we knew it, excuse me. Before we knew it, we were pulling into Adelaide Station. Grabbing our overnight bags and coats, we piled off, leaving all the rest of our gear behind, which would be loaded onto the Perth-bound train. One of the Adelaide boys dragged us over to the Gresham Hotel, where we proceeded to give a few schooners a seeing to, not too thick with the beer after New South Wales and Victoria brews. We had Southwark, pronounced Suffolk, and the horrible brew called West End, which fair dinkum was barely drinkable. In my humble opinion, no point in whinging about it. Oh my God. Come on, Malone, get it down, you. Was the call. We had a few beers and a feed and then wandered back to the station. Started to smell a bit whiffy with no respite in sight. We showed our tickets to the platform snapper and boarded the link train for the Indian Pacific. The wide gauge line was, we picked up at Port Augusta and then all the way to Kalgoorlie. Once on the Indian Pacific, we found two-man sleeping apartments, which were the height of luxury to us. They even had a shower cubicle per compartment. The PA system sprang into life, announcing our impending departure, and away we went. First stop would be Port Pirie and then on to Port Augusta, following the coastline around till we came to the Nullarbor Plain. Seeing this treeless plain for the first time was absolutely awe-inspiring. I saw only one tree for two whole days, and yes, there was a big red kangaroo sitting under it. I think I might have made that up. The PA system called the next sitting in the dining car, and that was us. Away we went, hanging out for a good feed, which we got a three-course meal of soup of indeterminate origin, followed by steak and vegetables, rounded off with dessert of apple pie and custard. Not a speck of food was sent back to the kitchen. There was a bar in the next carriage and a few of the blokes gravitated towards it. I went back to my compartment to read and hope my fellow compartment dweller wouldn't get back too drunk. I wasn't looking forward to the night of snoring. The movement of the carriage ensured a good night's sleep, and to wake up at first light to see an unchanged landscape was a real bonus. We were on an early sitting for breakfast, and the minute it was called, we were there like a shot, filling up on toast and jam, wheat bix and whatever else we could lay our hands on, with coffee, tea and as much milk as we could drink. After breakfast, we headed back to our compartments to spend a leisurely day peering into the distance of the Nullarbor. We avoided talking about what awaited us in Perth. Trepidation was rife, but calming. G.D. Smith regaled us with stories of SAS daring do that he had read somewhere. He said the SAS had already served in Borneo in the confrontation.
Footnote: the Confrontasi.
With Indonesia over Borneo and the formation of Malaysia. He told us of the independent companies in World War II who led the Japanese a merry dance in the islands. And one in particular, the second independent company, fought them to a standstill in Timor. The importance of the second section was what they were, they were a West Australian outfit trained at Garden Island, which we were able to see very early in our training. I was cheesed off that I knew nothing about any of this stuff. I studied history at school, both ancient and modern, and concentrated on the wars between ancient Greece and Persia and between the Germans and Brits in Europe. I learned nothing about Australian soldiers against the Japanese, except for the snippets I'd read from my father. Unforgivable, really. I thought I would be well advised to scrub up on this Australian war history, because the Cadre would have great sessions on it, or so I thought. Once we passed Cook, we were close to the WA border, and once across we came to the mighty Kalgoorlie, a mining town of world renown. We changed trains here for the Kalgoorlie, the old WA rattler, carriages of an older vintage, which guaranteed a great night's sleep. We loaded up with grog and food at the Cal station and boarded our magic carpet for the final leg of this amazing journey. Everybody was getting a bit toey by this stage, and GD never helped with his stories of how we'd probably only last a week, and the Cadre staff are probably all fierce guerrillas who will beat us to death. On and on he went. Fucking Queenslanders. But it was all fun, and we laughed uproariously at GD's stories and jokes, and hope to Christ they were just that, stories. R.I.P. GD. He died about a week ago.
Oh, did he? Oh, sorry to hear that.
We had a Tasmanian on the draft, Joe Ross, who also made us laugh like drains. Joe and I formed a very close relationship and were as thick as thieves on the Cadre.
Footnote, Joe passed away a couple of years ago. R.I.P. Joe.
Rugby and Aussie rules were the two big topics on the train, and it appeared the group was evenly divided. I'd never seen a game of Aussie rules up to this stage, and showed little interest in the game with their ball squasher shorts and sleeveless jumpers, far too festive for me. Although, needless to say, I was to change my mind later on. Joe Rice, being from Tassie, was an Aussie rules man, as was Ken Bowen from Melbourne. Big Dave Grieve turned out to be a star ruckman and went to play for Claremont in the Waffle. Alan Ingram loved the game as well and played a good standard later on. Johnny Davies was also a ball of fun. I thought, what a great bunch of blokes to be doing the Cadre with. Best thing was, I was not intimidated by any of them. We were all mates with a gut feeling about teamwork to get through whatever they were going to throw at us. And then we were in Perth, the magic state capital and home of the fabled Special Air Service Regiment. We were met at the train by a well-turned-out red-headed sergeant in starched greens with Borneo and Vietnam ribbons on his shirt, along with the SAS parachute wings, which we eyed enviously, and his sandy barrow on a jaunty angle. Welcome to Perth. My name is Reg Corsten, and I'm here to take you out to Campbell Barracks. Once we found our ports and other gear, we climbed into the truck and headed west towards the coast to Swanbourne, where we found an old army camp built in the sand dunes during World War II, just north of the seaside Edel, Cottesloe. The guard on the gate was similarly turned out, and the truck stopped and walked around the back with his clueboard and cast a sarcastic eye over us. Yeah, right, he said. That was Maggot Johnson, I remember. The truck moved off with an arrogant guard shaking his head. I would come across this dickhead, the infamous Maggot Johnson, later on. We were initially dropped off at East Block, our home, until further notice. We were met at East Block by two corporals who seemed a bit laid back to us. Follow me, though, said one. Laden down with our luggage, we followed him into the building and up the stairs. Each room had 4 bed spaces and a locker. We filled up the rooms as we came up the stairs. The corporal then called us out into the hallway and gave us a few pointers about living at Campbell Barracks, where the ablutions were, where to park our cars, who had one here, where the mess hall was, and so on. There were already a few blokes here who were on our cadre, and a bunch of Ordnance Corps blokes, including Stanley Bilborough and Bart Maverick. Somehow, Bart was an 18-year-old corporal. How does that work? I asked myself. Stanley and I would become mates for many years and still are. He was the maddest bastard I ever met, and a good show no fear bush soldier. There were also a bunch of SIGs on the course: Craig Possum Bramley, Kerry Curly Clark, and a few others, including Kevin Logan, a medic, another switched on bloke.
Footnote: Kev recently passed away after a long illness. R.I.P. Kev.
Yeah. Kev would later look after 3 Squadron at Dewey Dad in Vietnam, an excellent all-round medic. Our first meal in the mess was lunch, and it was an eye-opener. All the shayaking from 3 Squadron blokes who just returned from leave after their tour of Vietnam left no room for us to be anything but mute spectators. As I said, this was a real glimpse into the character and soul of the regiment, which we all hoped would accept us callow youths. We were pretty friendly. They were pretty friendly, the likes of Buff Lorimer, Bubbles Merton, Bill Nagel, John Juvie Matten, Ross McCallum, Freddie Roberts, and Ian Bags of Styles all came up and welcomed us with a wry smirk. The food was plentiful and of some quality, with Grumpy Reed and Blue Ryan behind the jump, Sandy Barrows on a jaunty angle. As usual, the duty officer circulated with the perennial DO questions. Any complaints? Needless to say, there were no complaints. I remember that day.
Lots of good memories, huh?
Oh, mate.
Yeah. So that's the end of chapter 5.
That's the end of the chapter.
Yeah, of Two Ranks on the Road, selected for SAS Cadre. So lots of really great memories in there. And the main thing you take away from that chapter are all the blokes, all the names of all these personalities, many of whom I have memories of as a kid, who were always sort of around the place. And then other blokes who I know just by name because they were legends who would pop up in the various histories, or you'd see them on ANZAC Day. So
yeah, memories. It's fantastic. That's why I had to write this book, of course.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it was one of those things after a little while. I mean, you'll notice in the footnotes, it becomes thick and fast after a while where it says, and this one passed away after a long illness. This one passed away, RIP, RIP. And, there's lots of respect given to these blokes who passed away. But, you're sort of in the point of life now where there are far more funerals to go to than weddings. It's,
I don't go to either.
yeah. Yeah, it's the memories are great, and you talk in the beginning of the chapter about how separating from the blokes who you were at Ingleburn with was a wrench. Having to, did you see many of those blokes again? Some of those guys who you were sad to leave.
Yeah, some of them. Swimmer Bates was caught up with in Vietnam, actually.
Yeah,
But Timmy Cutcliffe was killed in action. He was fantastic bloke. Just blown up with a mine.
right.
And that was the end of poor little Tim. He was only 20 years old.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I sort of moved on from them.
Yeah, and you ever
I had
see
a
that?
new bunch of blokes to get used
Yeah,
to.
and I guess the Anzac Day, you would see, because you're in Perth, a lot of those New South Wales blokes, they'd be over in Sydney, so you wouldn't see them very often.
No,
It wasn't until the last 20 years where Facebook and things like that meant that you could reconnect.
I've kept up with a lot of blokes.
Yeah.
Met a lot of these guys at Duntroon, were all warrant officers together.
Mm.
Still in contact with all those blokes.
Yeah. And then, so there's a story about the tattoos. I love the story about the bloke with the fox hunting tattoo.
My doctor Fergus McCabe took the book on a plane trip to Europe,
Yeah.
and he's reading it, and he read the bit about the fox hunting scene on the
Yeah.
bloke's back. He said to me later, he said, "I know that bloke. He said, I know him." He said, I said,
It,
"Oh, good luck. I can't remember his name."
yeah, probably
Oh,
best to stay anonymous. And then you were a sook about. I always thought it was funny that you went through all the things you went through over the course of your career, but then the thing you always complained about the most was how much a tattoo on your forearm hurt.
it did. And my daughter got a tattoo on an ankle of
Yeah,
a turtle, and right on the bone it was too. And I thought, how the hell did you tolerate that?
yeah,
You're a tattoo man.
I do. I got some, but
Show,
yeah.
show someone on your shoulder.
Well, it's sort of fitting that I'm wearing my Tigers shirt. I'm wearing my Balmain Tigers shirt, my
No.
beloved Tiger, and then I've got my Balmain Tiger on my shoulder, which is useful if you're watching on YouTube. If you're just listening on the podcast app, then you check us out on YouTube for the video version of this podcast. So I also love the description of the train trip to Perth because when I was 12 or thereabouts, we emigrated from Canberra to Perth, and we did it on the same train that you took, or maybe a more modern version. But so
Yeah,
you sort of used to romanticize that long trip across Australia on the Indian Pacific. Um,
we had a lovely time. Your kids had your own apartment. Joe and I had our own apartment, and it was
yeah,
fantastic.
no, it was great, and we had and so that first trip, so you would have taken that trip half a dozen times,
Oh, at least.
just going
Well,
back and
because
forth.
all the baggy asses and all the below officer rank um, went east to do courses.
Yeah,
All went by train every time, whereas
right.
the officers flew.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
they flew and got there before us every time, of course, and
And that was a
but
3 or 4 day train?
we accepted it. We loved the train journey,
Yeah,
especially with a couple of mates on board.
right.
Plenty of grog thrown down the throat. Um, all the shayaking that went on, my God, and the laughter, my God, never laughed so much in my life.
And then you're heading towards Perth. So what did you know about Perth before you got there for the first time?
Sweet FA, nothing.
Nothing. So when you were at school, and you did your Australian geography,
I
do
knew
you know?
about a bit about the geography. I knew about Kalgoorlie and the gold mines and stuff. Apart from that, really nothing.
Yeah.
I knew it was on the west coast. I hadn't heard of Rottnest Island.
Hmm.
Just it was like going to Bali the first time or going to Paris the first time. It was
Mm.
just a fantastic bloody journey for adventure.
But it was a very different city to how it is now. A very,
Oh
uh,
yeah,
it's a very modern city now.
just a big town in those days.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of weatherboard and sand. You see the old pictures of Perth looking down from Kings Park in the 70s, and it's like it's a different place.
Oh, totally different, man.
Yeah, yeah. And then the big star of this chapter and future chapters that we already talked about is GD Smith, who you mentioned, rest in peace, he just passed away. But he's I don't remember him from growing up. I don't he's
No,
not part of our story, but he really looms large in
yeah.
this story. So tell us a little bit about GD.
Well, GD came from Queensland, of course, and we used to give him bloody mouthfuls all the time about being a Queenslander. And after the Carter, he was one of the blokes that volunteered to go to 2 Squadron as a reinforcement.
Mm,
Him and Joe Rice and Ken Bowen, I think 3, 4, 5 or 6 blokes all went to 2 Squadron. Whereas and I was always wrapped to the fact that we did 2 years training before we deployed. But I never saw GD again, even though he was away with 2 Squadron. When he came back, we were away.
mm.
And then he got out of the army and went back to Queensland. He was heavily mixed up in the surf lifesaving organisations up there.
Right.
But his brother rang me the other day and said that GD was wrapped in the book and he passed it down to his grandson so he could learn a bit about what his old grandfather did.
Good. Well, it's
Yeah.
it's important. That's the reason why I pushed you to make sure you wrote this stuff down because of your grandchildren. And we actually had an instance, I think maybe I've already mentioned it, where your grandson Cormac, who's 15, used two ranks for a school project to he did a history of his
Oh
grandfather.
man, so wrapped in that.
Yeah.
What a
So
boy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then he did the theme music for
For this
for the
for this
podcast.
this podcast, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Happy
yeah.
one.
That's the thing. Yeah, we when we recorded the last episode, the theme music hadn't been finalized, so you got a chance to hear it
Oh
recently,
man,
and he
so good.
played it
Made
on the
made my
guitar.
skin crawl.
Yeah, so that was lovely. So that was Cormac and my wife Meg
Yeah,
put it all together and played it and produced it. So
fantastic.
clever people.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so the end of this chapter sees you welcome to the SAS, and it sort of very much feels like, um, it really feels like it was a welcome. I mean, I'm sure there were blokes who were ready to embrace you all, and or well, there's a lot of those instances where blokes would be intimidated or intimidating, but it sounds like it was a pretty friendly group.
Yeah, they weren't intimidating at all. They were just, how you going, mate? Yeah, good, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them probably went through the same thing 12 months,
Oh,
2 years
absolutely.
earlier. Yeah. So they all knew. And then your duty in future years was to welcome the new blokes yourself. So
Yeah, yeah.
when you were in the
Well,
regiment in 1970, 71, blokes came in through the Cadre, and you were welcoming to them too.
yeah, what went around came around.
That's good.
We knew what we had to do, and we had to make the new guys feel welcome. Otherwise, we wouldn't get the best out of them.
Hmm.
Even though the selection courses got harder and harder. When I was back there as 2IC training squadron running the selection courses, they were harder than I'd ever imagined. I said to the boss one day, I said, why are we making this so hard? Oh, we have to, we've got to
Yeah.
select. And I said, well, you got 35 blokes on the cadre and you're only going to select 5? He said, yep, that's all we need. I thought,
Yeah.
that's a bit hard. So
Yeah.
there's sometimes there's 100 on the selection course and they only select 20 or
Yeah.
15. It's brutal. But it wasn't brutal on my day because they needed us all.
Yeah. Well, in the next episode, we'll get to talk about the actual ins and outs of the Carter. So looking forward to seeing that next week. But that is all the time we have this week for Never Die Wondering. So join us next week for the next installment in our exploration of Mick Malone's career as we get into the next chapter, the 6th chapter of the book itself, entitled SAS Cadre Collie. If you have a copy of Two Ranks, read along with us. I've been Toby Malone, and thanks to Mick Malone for cautiously joining me on this journey.
My pleasure, bud.
This has been Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words. For links to purchase your own copies of Mick's books, visit the show notes or mickmalone.com.au. This podcast is produced by Toby Malone, Joe Malone and Mick Malone, and engineered by Toby Malone. Theme music is The Happy Wanderer, the official SAS march, as reimagined by Cormac Malone and Meg Malone. Yes, this is a family affair. This is a GM production in association with Imprimatur Books.